welcome to In the News for April 22, 2022. There's a lot of 22s in there, Jeff. It is good to see you. I am Brett Birdie from appsandlaw.com.
Hey, this is Jeff Richardson from iPhone JD. Happy Earth Day, Brett.
It is Earth Day. It is Earth Day. And I wish the earth was a little kinder to me on my cold this past week, my non-COVID cold. I had to take all the tests and everything. Like, I wouldn't have thought about having to take a test, but anytime I start getting sniffles, it's like, oh my goodness,
sure.
where do we have the COVID test? Like, we have to do it because that's the first thing people are going to ask. Anyway, I lost my voice, getting it back now, but hopefully there won't be too many squeaks and squawks throughout the day. But man, lots of stuff that you covered today, Jeff. Let's get right into it with our first little public service announcement. You linked to a story, which is a little scary. I saw a couple of other people reporting on this this past week as well, that the mute button may not mean mute.
Yeah.
We're talking specifically about Zoom and Microsoft Teams. We're still waiting on the final results of this report from students apparently at the University of Wisconsin. But a little scary here.
Yeah, I mean, what they were reporting is that some of the apps, and they don't say which one. So is it Zoom?
Yeah,
is it Teams?
yeah.
Is it Ring Central? Who knows which one of them it is? But they say that some of the services, when you press the mute button on your screen, of course, that means the other person can't hear you. But
Right.
they say the service itself is still getting your audio and doing, who knows what with it. And it's interesting because I've certainly had times where, I will mute Zoom because I'm having another conversation. And as an attorney,
Right.
it is sometimes an attorney-client privilege conversation.
Confidential.
It's something
right.
I think about. I just did a mediation about a week ago where when I wanted to talk privately with my client, I would of course mute the main screen and go off, and my client and I would talk on my iPhone. But what I actually
Right.
did is I walked, and not knowing anything about the study, it was just, I didn't, even though I saw I was muted, I didn't completely trust it. So I just walked to the next room in my office, and he did the same thing in his house. And we talked that way, but it's just something to consider. I wish they would not have released the report without the study being available in the publication, because we don't know what services they're talking about. And it sure would be nice to be able to get those services to comment upon what's going on and can they address it. But it's an interesting thing that just because you're muting doesn't mean you're not sending your sound up to the service and they're doing who knows what with it. So
I have to say it doesn't surprise me, and I kind of suspected it because you probably have seen this too. I think everybody has seen it. When I'm muted and I mute because I got a cough or I got to do something, all of a sudden inside Zoom, a little message pops up and says, hey, you're muted. If you're trying to talk, if you're trying to say something, you're actually muted. And I'm thinking to myself, well, I know that, but how do you know that, Mr.
But I've always thought that was like my local computer telling me that. It had never occurred to me, and we'll see what the study says. But if it means that they're not just doing that locally, but if they're actually sending my voice up to the Zoom server somewhere, and I don't mean to pick on Zoom because we don't know, but that's what I want to know. So,
absolutely.
Until we find out the details, besides leaving the room, like I said, another alternative is to use a product that has an actual mute button on it.
Right.
Like the microphone that I'm using right here is a Blue Yeti microphone, and it actually has a little button on it. So, I mean, if I press the button and then I depress it, now you can hear me.
Right.
So, and it just cuts it off at the microphone end. So if it's something that you're really concerned about for this reason or for any other reason, that might be something to consider.
Yeah, and like you said, we're all anxious. I mean, I think I saw this. They linked to it here. It's just a couple of students at the University of Wisconsin in Madison, which good on them for jumping into this. And we'll see what that final research says. I think another couple of universities jumped on this when they found that they were working on it, and it's going to be I think they are trying their best to get comments from the actual companies themselves. But just like you said, even in this story that you linked to today, they recommend using the double mute technique. So if you really, 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 really want to know that you're muted, you can mute inside Zoom or whatever other application. And then for me, I do use a microphone similar to you, Jeff, where you can unplug it from your computer. Like if you really want to be sure, you can completely unplug it, and that way there's nothing that's getting into it.
Actually, I'm not sure that would work though, Brett, because if you unplug your mic, wouldn't it default
that's true, the onboard,
and so it wouldn't be as good of a signal. But so you really need to have something with a hardware mute button to be 100% safe. Anyway,
that's right. And the thing is, a lot of people do use the onboard microphone on their laptop, whatever that laptop may be, Jeff. And in that case, I don't know if you have a better option other than leaving the room, just like you said. But if you have a headset that has a mute button, or like your microphone. Okay, so that was our PSA for today. Just know that if it's something specifically that you want to be absolutely double sure that people aren't being able to listen to you, then just make sure that you take an extra precaution that you are fully muted on a screen. Let's move to iPads now. I have to tell you, Jeff, I have a little confession to make. I had a little bit of an iPad buying splurge this past week. I finally upgraded my 2018 iPad Pro that has been working fantastically. You know, I created all my iPad courses with it. I mean, it's been working great. But I finally upgraded to a 12.9-inch iPad Pro based on your many recommendations. And I got the 512 gig because that's plenty on there. But my wife, I think, had, oh my goodness, she might have been still working on a 2015 iPad.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
It was one of my old ones. And so, again, based on your excellent recommendations, I thought an iPad Air would be perfect for her. It's fast enough. She doesn't need the Face ID. The Touch ID works great. But I got her the Magic Keyboard with it because, wow, that really makes a big difference. I mean, that's her primary computer. She doesn't use a computer for anything else, but she does all the planning for so many things in the family and outside. And her iPad is basically her computer. And really, sure enough, my son was just looking at it sitting on the counter yesterday, and he said, Mom, he goes, if I didn't know any better, that looks like a laptop.
Right.
Like that really looks like a laptop. And sure enough, she's using it more like a laptop. So I was thrilled when I saw your links today in the news where you, a couple of stories here about how, some folks on 9to5Mac and some other places are thinking, wow, the iPad Pro is extremely powerful. They've got the M1 chips in there now. Like, does Apple need to do more to differentiate the iPad Pro from the Mac? They're still different, but I got to tell you, this is like having two laptops on my desk now. The iPad Pro on one side of my desk, Jeff, and then I've got my MacBook Pro as well. And it's wonderful to be seamless and being able to use both of them. But I'm almost like it's crossed my mind. Do I really need two laptops? I mean, that's almost how I'm thinking about it here. But these are some good stories I thought you linked to.
You said that your wife has a Magic Keyboard, but you also have a Magic Keyboard with
I
your
do,
12.9
absolutely.
inch? Okay.
And
yeah,
it
absolutely.
is fantastic.
Yeah. I mean, I've talked about this in the past, and although I technically have a laptop computer that I'm using here in my office, it's a Dell computer that my firm provided to me. I never travel with it. I only travel with the iPad because it really does just about everything that I need. And I've talked about that before. Having said that, well, I say, nearly everything I need. It doesn't do everything. I mean, there are definitely some things that's always been true that there are things you can do in a computer and not the iPad. And in the early days, I understood the reasons for the distinction because you wanted it to be more approachable, easier to use, all that sort of stuff. But there's been, and people have been talking about this for a while. Wouldn't it be nice if the iPad, especially the iPad Pro, could be more powerful in terms of getting work done? And I understand that Apple wants to keep the ease of use, but, people on the street, everybody's grandmother or grandfather, they buy laptop computers all the time, even though they're very sophisticated and can do all sorts of complex stuff. I mean, heck, if you launch the right terminal app, you're looking at a command prompt, if people can figure out how to use computers, I think people could figure out an iPad that was a little bit more complicated. And so anyway, recently, Mark Gurman of Bloomberg sort of predicted that we might get more advanced features maybe this year. And that's caused a bunch of other reports, some of which I linked to this morning. I just hope it's true, because the thing about it is I feel like the iPad, it's not been a steady improvement in capabilities. It comes in fits and bumps. Like, a couple of years ago at the beginning of the pandemic, I think it was, Apple added, well, first of all, it came out with the Magic Keyboard, which you now own. And they also, alongside of that, came up with the fantastic support for an external device, a pointing device like a mouse or a trackpad. And of course, which in your case, the trackpad's built in. And they also came out with, even better support for keyboards. And so now, I mean, if you have an iPad screen and you've got a keyboard and you've got a mouse or a trackpad, I mean, you can get sophisticated work done as long as the iPad allows you to do it. So I don't have specific suggestions, but, there's just so many times that, I need to jump over to a computer to do something. And I just wish I could do more with the iPad. And now that Apple has split the iPad operating system from the iPhone operating system, I think it's totally reasonable. Keep the iPhone more simple, but let the iPad get more sophisticated. Apple did not do a lot last year. I'm really hoping that they do more this year. So that's my wish list.
It seemed like in the story that you linked to, and then that story links to a couple of other stories. This is José Adorno, is the primary writer on this, that one of the main themes was, let us do more multitasking on the iPad. That's just kind of the feel that I got from some of the concept images that people were drawing up. Like they want to not just have split screen with 2 apps, but maybe let us have 3, or let us have another, slide over or something along those lines. There's a lot more to it, I know, than that, but it just seemed like that was sort of a major theme I saw.
Yeah, that's definitely an example. But many other things too. It needs to grow up more. And I don't mind if some of the stuff is sort of hidden away that you only really know about it if you look for it. Maybe on its face, keep the same simple interface, but just allow for more sophisticated functions. So I'm sure that Apple knows this too. And I know that there is the tension because, complexity does take away from ease of use, and you have to do a good balance.
Right.
But I just wish we didn't have these jump forwards every 2 years, every 3 years. I wish that every single year that the iPad operating system was updated, we got some significant pro features. And I know that's just my perspective that I come from. But let those of us that are using iPad Pros or even iPad Airs to get real work done, let us get some more sophisticated features. That's my pick.
If I'm not mistaken, I think Mark Gurman mentioned or suggested maybe that Apple should have an iPad Pro version, right? Or at least have like give users the ability to maybe run a Pro version of the operating system, to unlock certain additional features. I don't know if I'm fully on board with that
that's
personally.
A possibility. I don't know, but it's something to think about. He's also argued in the past that you should be able to run macOS on the iPad.
Yeah,
and I think that that's a bridge too far for me. I mean, of course it's possible because they're using the exact same chip. And so I totally understand where he's coming from on that.
Right.
But if the one thing that we've learned from the Windows Surface type computers is that, an operating system that's made for a computer, I think really those are different.
Yes,
I mean, a tablet is different from a computer. So it's better to have operating systems that are tailored for each different environment, but they can meet a lot in the middle.
Well, I would just reiterate the things that we have said a couple of times before. If you are in the market for an iPad, the iPad Air, the one that just came out, a couple of months ago or so, Jeff, that is really a fantastic machine. And I agree with what you had an article that you wrote a couple of months ago and said that this is probably more than enough for most of the lawyers. I went ahead and upgraded to the 12.9. Just like you, Jeff, I love the extra screen real estate, but I'm a little bit more on the nerdy side, right? I mean, I do this because I love handwriting. Like all my notes are taken on here. And it's really a wonderful device. But honestly, I got to tell you, when I put the 12.9 iPad Pro and put it in a case and stack it on top of my MacBook Pro laptop and I carry them around, I feel like I'm almost back to carrying the 9.5-pound Gateway laptop that I used when I was in law school. Like I'm telling myself, I'm like, wow, I'm almost, it's like come full circle. I mean, I love it. And obviously so much more power. I mean, I even had a floppy drive in that Gateway laptop, but it just, that's not for everyone. Right. And I think what you've said this several times, the iPad Air is great for my wife. She is elated with it. It's more than enough power with that M1 chip in it. But if you do want some more real estate, the iPad Pro, the screen is absolutely brilliant on this. And the Magic Keyboard, people always poo-poo it because of the expense of it. But I got to tell you, I thought there was a battery in it, Jeff. There's no battery in the Magic Keyboard. The Magic Keyboard has backlit keys and it takes its power from the iPad. It's just amazing. Like the seamlessness. And now with my Mac to go back and forth on those. Okay, I'll stop talking about it. But
actually, let me ask you one question. I'm just curious.
Yes.
It's been a while. Yes, I'm looking right now. I first got the 12.9-inch iPad Pro. I think it was in 2015. Yeah, that's when the first version. So I've had 7 years with the big one now, but I can still remember 7 years ago when I first got that 12.9-inch screen. It seemed so big that for the first 2 weeks, I thought to myself, uh-oh, I made a mistake here.
Yeah.
This is too big. But then I got
much.
used to it. And now it's just the opposite. Now I use
Can't
that
go
extra
back.
screen real estate all the time.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious, Brett, you've had it since Monday. So it's, you're on day 5
Yes,
right
sir.
now. Does it
Yes.
still feel like ridiculously big, or, where are you in that transition?
No,
Good.
not at
Okay.
all. But again, I'm a little on the, skewed in my perception because I have always argued that you can never have enough screens. Right. I mean, I always tell people, like, in the old days, we worked on a desk with paper, but none of us worked in, like, a 2 foot by 2 foot area. Like, we would spread things out, right? And in my mind, today's modern desktop is the screens. And so I have 2 screens connected to my MacBook Pro, and then I have my iPad Pro on the side as well. So, and the great thing about using a Mac is that I can use my mouse cursor and go back and forth between all those screens and my iPad Pro. It's just really great. And I would have 2 more screens if I could. I mean, I don't think you can have enough because that's our workspace today. It really is. Okay, that's a little nerdy, right? But another story you linked to is about, we'll go from the iPad to the MagSafe. And you mentioned, we talked about this, a couple of months ago or so, or actually several months ago, where David Sparks talked about the Apple MagSafe battery pack. And he liked it, right? It was very convenient at the end of the day, kind of juice up, just a little bit, top off your iPhone. But this past week, Apple released an update, a software update, or what exactly do they call it here?
It's a firmware update. Yeah.
A firmware update.
Just
yes.
like Apple updates the AirPods Pro
Yeah.
from time to time. Yeah.
Which improved it immensely.
Yeah. So one of the big changes is it made it charge faster, which is, of course, something that you really want when you're charging your device, whether you're using MagSafe or a cord or any other ways. You want it to get back to a full charge as fast as possible. MagSafe has always been incredibly convenient. Apple's version of the Qi wireless charging. As I understand it, if you're charging an iPhone on something that's plugged in, you can get a 15-watt charge, which is not as fast as just plugging in a regular cord, but it is fast. But if you're using something portable like the MagSafe portable battery that Apple sells, up until this week, it charged at 1/3 of that speed at 5 watts. And the change that Apple made to the firmware is they increased it to 7.5. Now, I think that is the fastest that Apple supports portable charging is 7.5. So again, 5 to 7.5 is still not the fastest in the world, but at the same time, it's a 50% over increase over what you could have before this week. So I think it just makes it a little bit more useful. And I'm glad that Apple did that, because it always seemed a little odd that the Apple product, which was more expensive because it's like $100 or a little bit less on Amazon, would sometimes charge a little bit slower at 5 watts than some of the third-party batteries, which could use the full 7.5. So I'm glad that there's no parity.
To me, it's just a little amazing that this is a battery pack and they had a firmware update for a battery pack and it provided this improvement. I just think that's great. Now, could we see more in the future? I don't know. I will tell you, I actually picked up this little device, I think about a week ago or so, because I found it for the low bargain price of $13. It's called the Jiga wireless MagSafe portable charger. And you can see it's got the MagSafe on it, right? It'll connect onto my iPhone Pro and it works great. But I got to tell you, it's just not as seamless, Jeff. Like, I'm glad that I got it because I just wanted to test it out to see if a $13 device could work.
It says $30 on Amazon right now.
It does, but I had it. It was a special sale that I found a couple of weeks ago or so, and I think they even still have a little coupon that you can clip there. But I just wanted to try it because I've never had, because the MagSafe costs $99 still, right? But I think I would tell you, and I think I remember this, David Sparks said this in his review, it's just so seamless because it's Apple. Like this one, I have to actually connect it to my, magnetize it to the back of my phone, and then I have to push a button for it to make it come on, which, it's not as seamless. It does have extra ports where I can charge some other devices. So that's one of the reasons I just wanted to try it out. But I just wanted to point that out.
I've also heard some of the third-party ones are a little heavier. Does that feel?
They are. It's much heavier. Yes, absolutely.
So, but you say,
I was thinking to myself,
$80.
I can't put it in my pocket. Like, I'm like, okay, if I take this with me, it's going to have to go in like my briefcase or something, because it would just be, it's heavier than my iPhone is, which is, it's a battery. So I understand it may have a little bit more gas in it because I can charge some other devices. But I just have to tell you, when I got it and I was excited to try it out, but I still want an Apple MagSafe. Like I want to go to the real deal.
I'll mention one thing. The one,
go
just
ahead.
Real quick, the product that you were just showing on Amazon that you purchased, it actually says on that product page that it charges at 15 watts. But just so that people know, that is, I think that works for certain Samsung phones that have a fast charging option. Right. That's not the iPhone. These types of products will charge at either 5 or 7.5 with the iPhone.
It is fairly slow.
And I don't know that it even describes that on the page, but that is a true limitation.
I'm sure they do. I didn't look all that closely because, again, for $13, I just wanted to try, okay, can something like that cheap, I can handle $13 to just give me a, try. And it only had 1 rating too, which should have been a clue to be all there. I mean, I'm glad I got it because it's you can never have too many battery packs, right? Just like you can't have too many monitors. But the idea is like, it's not quite as good. I pine for going to the actual Apple MagSafe one. Speaking of our friend David Sparks, he put a nifty little tip. This is like bonus tip for today. Yeah. I did not know this, but even when I was going into the Apple store this week, I had some kind of a question on my iPhone. I can't remember. And of course they had to look up my IMEI number, which I know that a lot of this information is available under the settings and under general and the settings and the about, I believe, on there. But this was a nifty little tip from David Sparks. You can just type in your keypad and bring up this information.
Yeah, you can get this information through general about, but it's just so big and obvious, and sort of it's a fun thing to try. So if you haven't done this, just pick up your iPhone and go into the phone app and then type the asterisk, which is I think the lower left, and then type pound, which is the lower right, and then 06. And then just the reverse, pound, and then asterisk. So those 6 buttons, and you don't have to hit send or anything like that. As soon as you hit the 6th button, your screen will change and it will display all of these different numbers along with barcodes so that somebody else can actually scan it. I mean, this is obviously some sort of diagnostic tool, but if somebody ever asks you for any of these numbers, EID, IMEI, and that's a quick way to get to them. And in fact, I know, Brett, in our show notes or somewhere I'd seen you figured out what all those different numbers are.
I tried because I'm like, I can't not be comfortable unless I know. The EID is apparently embedded identity document, but that is like the eSIM identifier, which, you and I got to talk about sometime. I had one of our listeners actually email me, Jeff, and he talked about the fact that he retired, but he still had a business line and he had a personal line. And I think he was working with T-Mobile, that he wanted to, still take phone calls from his business line that he'd had for years. Well, now he can use one iPhone, and because it's an eSIM, okay, you know about this already. He can
you're basically having two phone numbers.
Right. Yeah, that's fantastic.
We've had phones for a while that actually had 2 SIM ports. I'm trying to remember if the iPhone had that. I think the iPhone did have a version of that in some markets a long time ago. But now what I think all the iPhones now have, or most of them, is that it has an electronic SIM, which doesn't actually have a card. So you change the phone number associated with it. You don't actually change it. Your carrier changes it. And then the other one is a physical card that you could put in and out on the side. So, and I don't use this feature a lot because I'm not trying to use 2 different phone lines on my phone, like the person that you had mentioned. Some people use it when they travel internationally because they want to keep their domestic number maybe on the eSIM and then just get one of these cheap SIM cards that you can get at like a kiosk when you're in another foreign country and put it in there for data in the foreign country. So anyway, of those numbers that are displayed, the EID is the one that tells you the sort of the serial number for your eSIM.
And to me, that's a perfect opportunity to use this little tip from David, right? If you go into a carrier and you want to do something like this listener was doing, which I just find that fascinating. Like to me, that's the future because he has one phone now, but he can handle, business calls. They may still come to that business line and he can use the same phone for a personal line, which I just think is amazing. But if you need to do something like that, you would need to bring up your EID in your phone and this little tip. And the IMEI number, I know has been around for a while. It's International Mobile Equipment Identity. These are all unique numbers to your phones, and it's just the way that it works on the carriers on there. So anyway, just a fascinating little bonus tip. I like that there.
Yep.
Something we have talked about before is app tracking transparency from Apple, Jeff, and I like this feature. Both of us have talked about it before, but this was a little bit of a disconcerting story you linked to today that maybe the app tracking transparency isn't doing everything that it's supposed to be doing. I hope this isn't the case, but there's some people at least asking some questions about it.
Yeah, I mean, everybody noticed when ATT became effective because suddenly your iPhone started to give you pop-ups saying, the track Facebook would like to follow you around your entire life and share that information with the world. Not exactly the same wording.
Do you
but
want to
the
do
same
that?
idea.
Sure.
And you could either say yes or no. And I think many people clicked no. And Facebook has revealed that it resulted in its revenue decreasing substantially because it couldn't sell all of your personal information. But anyway, the point of this article that was in Ars Technica is that folks that want to monetize selling information about you are starting to find ways to work around ATT. And again, this is the cat and mouse game that you knew was going to happen. Apple's going to make it harder for people to track you and find out and use your private information. The third parties are going to find ways to get around it. And then the next version, Apple is going to close some of those loopholes, and then they're going to find new ones. It's not unlike the security loopholes, although it's not quite as scary because this isn't, attacking your phone. It's just, invading your privacy. And I say it negatively. I mean, I know that some people, I hear them say, well, you know what? My life's an open book. I don't care if Google wants to know everything I purchase and everywhere I go, because in return, I get to use Gmail for free without paying for it, and everything else that Google offers, and that's Facebook, and that's fine. I mean, that's a decision you can make, but until recently, it wasn't a decision you could make. It was just that's the way it was. Now, Apple's trying to put a little bit more of the control in your hands, so you can decide whether you do or don't want to allow those tracking features. So it's just, I knew this article was inevitable. You could have written this one beforehand. It's just a matter of weeks or months or years before the article says people find a way to work around something that Apple did to try to stop them from doing this, and then the next article is going to be Apple has now closed that loophole.
Well, and let's just underscore, we've said this before when we've talked about ATT, which is not AT&T, it's ATT, App Tracking Transparency. If you really want to enforce it across the board, you can go into your settings, privacy, tracking, and turn off allow apps to request to track. That is probably, at least right now, like if you really want to go across the board, I think I turned that on when this option came out, but that would be one way at least to do the most that you can possibly do. I don't think it's going to do 100%.
Yeah, but then people are finding ways to work around that.
Exactly.
Okay.
We talked about live text in Photos a while back, and I think this is a fantastic little feature that you have within Photos. But I remember distinctly, Jeff, that back then you also mentioned the fact that means, hey, if the iPhone can look at text from the photos, then theoretically you should be able to search the text in those photos. And that is absolutely true, except that you can't do the search from within the Photos app. I remember you talking about this before.
Yeah, I think I talked about
a little discouraged about this.
I think I talked about this months ago, and Glenn Fleishman just wrote about this for Macworld, so I linked to it again. I mean, the thing is, if you take a picture and somewhere in your picture there's a sign, like let's say the name of the restaurant that you were eating at, you might want to say, "Oh yeah, when did we eat at Jose's restaurant?"
Right.
But
yes.
So you would think that if you pull up the picture, you can tap on the name of the restaurant and it will select the text as text that you could paste into a web browser or something. And so it ought to be able to search for that. It can't do it from within the Photos app, but it can do it if you're on your main screen of your iPhone and you sort of swipe down from the top of the screen and do a search. So clearly Apple, my guess is that Apple must realize that the search is not perfect yet. And so they're sort of giving you a way to get around to it. And Glenn describes how in this article, but it's just as simple as swiping down from the top and putting your search term in there, and then in the results, looking at photos. My hope is that once Apple feels like this is more complete, they will add it to the search feature within Photos, because that's what we want, right? We want that you can tap on the what's the icon for the magnifying glass? I want to be able to tap on the magnifying glass icon to get into search and then type in a word. And I want all the pictures to show up regardless of whether the word appears in a tag, in a location, in the album name, or in the content of the photo itself. And then that will give me the best way to get at the photos. Because I tell you, as people have had iPhones for so long and have taken pictures for so long, we have so many of them, right?
Yes,
I mean, I think I've got like over 50,000 photos on my iPhone. Sometimes I can find them by an album name or by a date, but sometimes I was like, gosh, I know we've been to this place before. I can't remember when. It would be nice if I could just do a search and find it that way.
Yeah. Okay. Boy, that's like a bonus tip. That's another good tip. You can search the text in your photos, just not from within the Photos app. You have to do it from the general search box on there. From searching photos to Wordle, Mr. Wordle. You're still doing Wordle every day, aren't you, Jeff?
I do, and I'm not the only one. As this article
apparently
revealed,
not.
Somebody learned that Vice President Kamala Harris also uses Wordle just about every day. And I thought this was a cute article from The Ringer.
This was great.
Because,
yes.
You know,
yes.
the author Claire McNear is talking, and the Vice President even mentioned, she's like, nobody has ever interviewed me on these sorts of questions before. People,
and she was so happy to talk about
international policy and stuff like that. How fun to talk about something like this. But what I thought was sort of, you know, endearing is that she has, you know, I've always been sort of a word game person, you know,
right,
I'm sure many of the listeners too. I love crossword puzzles. I'm not the person that can do the New York Times crossword every day. I wish I was that person. But it's in this article, she talks about how she tries to do Wordle just about every day, and she's got a pretty good percentage on it. And then she talks about how she likes some of the other things too, like crosswords and stuff like that.
This is so great. She even reveals her what is the first word. I don't do the Wordle every day, but you typically have a word you start with, right? Hers is notes. What's yours, Jeff? Are you going to reveal your
so
first
I can
word?
reveal. So the one that I start with every day is stare, S-T-A-R-E.
Ooh, that's good too. Vowels,
because it's got two vowels in it. Yeah, and then if that doesn't help me, the next one I use is pound, and the final one I use is climb.
Okay.
Because sometimes after those first two, I can guess it. Like the one that's today's April 22nd, I got it after the first two. But if I don't have it from there, and now my last little world tip is if you've done stare and pound and climb and you still have no idea what it is, my fourth word that I only use rarely is gawky, Gawky. And the reason I use it is because once you've used that, you've only got 7 letters left in the alphabet, and they're letters that very rarely show up in words like Q and Z and X and V.
I was going to say, right,
because
the ones that you have left are
the
K.
F, F, H, J are still there. But so anyway, those are my Wordle tips. I can usually get a Wordle puzzle, much like the Vice President said in this interview. I can usually get it on the 4th one, sometimes the 5th one. I was so upset, Brett, because I've had a streak of 100%. I had not missed a single Wordle since the New York Times acquired them. And then earlier this week, I just could not guess it. I got to one of the points where I had 4 of the 5 letters. But that 5th letter could have been like 5 different words. So I just had to guess one, and it was wrong. And I guessed the second one, and it was also wrong.
Oh my goodness!
The answer was the 3rd one. I was like, oh. So I was very. I'm now at 99%.
Sorry, you broke your streak.
I know, so be it. But anyway,
the only thing I'll link to this article because it's great. At first, I was like, are they making this up? Like, surely they didn't interview the Vice President about Wordle, but it's such a cute little interview. But I feel so bad for the Vice President in the sense that she isn't allowed to share out her result. I mean, from when I did Wordle like 1 or 2 times, the thing is you can tweet it out, right? Or you can like text messages like, hey, I got this solution. You know, I solved it in 2 or whatever the case may be. But the poor Vice President isn't allowed to tweet from her mobile phone. It's all locked down apparently. And I'm like, why would you even play that if you can't share it? But obviously she enjoys it.
Yeah, and it's more than that. She revealed that she can't text from her phone. I mean, this is obviously Secret Service limitations. She can't text with the phone. She even described that she plays some of the New York Times games like the spelling bee one.
Right.
She said that she can't subscribe to the New York Times. I'm guessing because that would put a cookie on the device. And obviously you don't want third-party services putting cookies on, the Vice President's device so that you know where she or the president are at any time. Right. So I can understand why they have incredibly locked down the iPhones.
Oh my goodness.
And they have to, in fact, for that reason, Brett, I'm never going to run for president because I don't want to have my iPhone locked down. That decides it. I was thinking of running, but no, I've now decided not to. So.
That's it, because you can't share your Wordle. Fantastic. In the know, my tip, unsurprisingly, is going to be related to my brand new iPad Pro and my smart keyboard, and more specifically on the smart keyboard. When I first got it, the smart keyboard, that is. And I put it on this iPad Pro. It is absolutely fantastic, Jeff. And you've been talking about it for so long. And I love the trackpad. But when I needed to select something with the trackpad, it was this huge clunk. It sounded to me like the old trackpads from like my old computers. And I'm like, I don't want it to clunk that loud. One of the first things I do on any new MacBook that I use, a computer, Jeff, is I go into the mouse settings, because by default, it is a click that you have to do on the mouse to select something. But the Macs in the system preferences for the mouse will allow you to change it to a tap. So if you want to select something, you can tap it as opposed to clicking it. And when I first started using the Magic Keyboard on my iPad Pro, I'm like, I can't deal with this. This is too big of a clunk. Like people are going to know that I'm clicking and I don't want to be clicky all the time. So I was like, Shirley, please, for the love of clicking mercy, there has to be a way to be able to switch it to a tap. And sure enough, there is. You can go into the settings. And if you have, I think this is only if a Magic Keyboard is attached to it. Jeff, I don't know if there is a trackpad option in the settings if you don't have a Magic Keyboard, because you can go in there, the trackpad under general settings, you have a trackpad option. And one of the things that you can do is you can say tap to click. And I was so thrilled when I found that. And I think it took me a day or two. And you also, by the way, can do a 2-finger secondary click, which is just a tap on there as well. Although I think you have to do a two-finger click on that one. I don't know if you can do a tap. So anyway, I was just so thrilled to find that. It's something so tiny, Jeff, but it was a big deal for me. And now, I mean, I'm almost doing the same gestures and clicking and tapping on my Magic Keyboard for the iPad that I've been using for decades on my MacBook Pro on the trackpad that I use there. So I'm thrilled that, I was thinking to myself when I first got it, I'm like, okay, I know this is something I want, but I don't know if it would be important that Apple would have given an option for me. And thank you, Apple. I appreciate the fact that you are keeping us in mind from the clicky angle. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I'm jealous that you have that Magic Keyboard. I've thought about purchasing it a number of times. The thing that keeps me away from it is that I would probably want to keep it on my iPad all the time, and then it adds a lot of extra weight. Plus, I don't use a keyboard with my iPad all the time. I do use it a lot, but not all the time. And so for me, like if I use the keyboard with my iPad, maybe about 25% more than I do right now, that would probably be enough for me to justify the purchase. Yeah. And these are famous last words. One of these days we'll be on the podcast. I'll be like, Brad, I got the Magic Keyboard.
You got it.
So, but I don't have it yet. But what I do use is external keyboards. And so that's the transition. When I saw you were talking about this today, I was like, well, let me talk about some keyboard tips, because I don't think we've talked about this before.
Yeah, these are good.
When you have any external Bluetooth keyboard, whether it's a fancy one like Brett has, or just, any other generic Bluetooth keyboard, you can do all sorts of shortcuts, just like you can on your computer. And so what I wanted to run through is I came up with about a dozen of them. And there's even more than these, but these are the ones that I use the most often. And there's a good chance that 90%, if not all of these, because they are either identical to or a close cousin to what you can do on a Mac or a PC with a keyboard. So let me just run through them. The first one is actually a different one that you're not going to have on the computer. Well, I guess you have it on the Mac, but not the PC.
I have it on the Mac. That's right.
Which is Command Space. And I use this all the time with my iPad. When I do Command Space, then it brings up a little search bar. And what I often use it for, and this is the same search bar we were talking about before for finding photos without searching photos.
Exactly.
But what I often use it for is finding an app. So if I want to launch an app, either because it's not on my toolbar, or I just don't want to lift my fingers from the keyboard to touch the screen, and I just want to launch, Microsoft Word or something, I can just hit Command Space and then type Word, and it will either be the first option, in which case I can just hit Return, or if it's the second or the third option, you can hit, I think it's just the arrows to move over to that option and then hit Return and launch the app. So you can launch an app without having your fingers leave the keyboard, which is great for efficiency. Another one that I use all the time and everybody knows is Command Tab to switch through apps. Totally useful. Use it all the time. Great solution. If you press and hold down the Command key, this is like a really useful one if you haven't seen this before. Whenever you're in an app on an iPad, just hold down the Command key for a second or two, and you will see a list of all of the commands. And one thing that they've changed recently is they're now organized into sections. It's almost like file, view, almost like the menus would be on a computer software. And you can see all the different keyboards so that you can find out, in this particular app that I like to use all the time, I want to learn that Command J or something will bring up some option that I find valuable. So that's a good one. One of them that is universal and works in all apps is Command H, which H for hide. It will hide. It basically goes back to your home screen. You can either think of it as hiding your current app or home, going to the home screen. But however you remember that H, I use that one all the time. Just jump to the home screen and jump around. Command F, obviously, this is something you can use in computers to find. Works great here. So if you're in an app like, I don't know, the Notes app or Microsoft Word or something, you can find. If you want to take a screenshot, I do that a lot for iPhone JD. But I also do it a lot because sometimes I will be looking at something in like a web page or something else, I'll take a screenshot of it and I'll crop down the screenshot to just the part I want. And then I'll copy that and then I'll paste it into like, GoodNotes or something, a notebook. Anyway, Command Shift 3 takes a screenshot.
Which is the same that you can use the buttons too, right, Jeff? But I like that if you got a keyboard buttons, connected. Yeah.
And it works fine with buttons, but if you have a keyboard connected, you don't need to lift your hands from the keyboard.
Exactly.
So the next one is if you want to select text, let's say you're in Microsoft Word or Notes or some app that has text in it. If you press the shift key and then press the left button or shift and then the right button, every time you click the arrow, that is, every time you click the arrow, as long as you're holding the shift key down, it will advance the selection one character at a time. So it's a good way to precisely select a specific word without having to use a mouse or something like that. And then something very similar to that, if instead of selecting a character, you want to select an entire word, one word at a time to select like a couple words in a sentence. Instead of doing like shift left or shift right, it's shift option left or shift option right. And again, these same tips will work with like something very similar will work with Microsoft Word on a computer, whether it be a Mac or PC. So this may be something you're familiar with. The next tip I wanted to mention is the globe key. And let me pause for a second here. As far as I know, the only keyboard that has a globe key on it is the Magic Keyboard that you have. It's another modifier key, just like Shift or Option or Control, something like that. And if you have the globe key, well, then you can use it for Apple. They're basically like universal things. Remember how I said before that Command H works in every app to go to the home screen? Well, it's one of the rare ones that doesn't. Most of the other universal commands, universal shortcuts that work in every single app on an iPad, they actually use the globe key now. And so, for example, you can do the globe key and A to make the dock show up at the bottom of the screen or make it disappear. So if you just want to display the dock or disappear the dock, globe key A. And you can also switch apps using globe key left or globe key right. Again, you can do the same thing using Command Tab, so you don't necessarily need it. So if you have the fancy new keyboard like Brett does, you have your globe key. But what if you don't? What if you want to use the globe key? Go ahead.
Yeah. I was just saying on the Mac, we have globe keys now. Like on the more recent Macs, there is a globe key, and some of those A works the same way. Go ahead, but I just wanted to point
But if you don't have a globe key, one of the things that you can do is you can go into. Brett was talking before about how you were saying that when you have a trackpad connected to your iPad, your settings actually shows trackpad options, but when you don't have the trackpad connected, you don't see it. And this is the same thing. If you have an external keyboard attached, when you go to settings and then general and then keyboard, you will see an option called hardware keyboard. You won't see the option for hardware keyboard if you don't have a hardware keyboard connected. But if you do, you will see the option for hardware keyboard. And once you tap it, you can do a couple things in there. One of the things that you can do is you can change modifier keys. And you can say, for example, one of my modifier keys, let's say one I don't use a lot is caps lock. Okay. Because it's sort of rude when you have all capital letters. It's like you're shouting. So I could say, whenever I have this keyboard connected to my iPad, change the cap locks key. Let's modify it so that it behaves like the globe key. And that's something that I actually might use. So that's a change that I have made. Or another thing you can do in the same place is you can say, let's just say you don't even use any of these globe shortcuts at all. You can say every time that I press the globe key, whether it's a hardware globe key on your keyboard or whether it's like I've repositioned my caps lock key as a globe key, I can say, instead of doing the other commands, every time I press that key, I want you to bring up the emoji keyboard. And this one's useful because if I'm typing text messages using the keyboard on my iPad or even the iPhone, the problem with using an external keyboard is because you don't see the main keyboard on the screen, you don't see the little button to jump into emoji. And so there are some ways you can get there. Like you can also do like control space bar to click keyboards and then find your emoji keyboard. But
this is so easy.
If you like emoji a lot, an even better way to do it, you may say emoji are, if emoji is more important to you than the other things that you can do with the globe key for controlling all the different apps. You might want to say my globe key is now going to be my emoji key. So anytime I'm typing, I can press the globe key and it will bring up the emoji keyboard. And then from there, you can just select, the happy face or,
I turned it on
or whatever you want.
That's so great.
That's a lot that I've just gone through. And again, my hope is that most of you listening know many of these, but perhaps not all of them, but they're really useful. And the last thing I'll say about these keyboard shortcuts is for me, you need to find the ones that you enjoy using, because they're only useful to me if they're just muscle memory, if I know that they're there.
Right.
And so there are
True.
dozens more keyboard shortcuts that you could find by searching online, or you can hold down the command key in an app and you can see them, but I just don't remember them. So, but these are the ones that I mostly do remember. And once you remember it, you use it. Much like, again, the perfect example is Command Tab on a Mac or Control Tab on Windows. You know, I think everybody knows those, and they're just so useful for switching between programs. So anyway, that's my long tip of the day on shortcuts.
That turning on that glow for emoji, it only works if you have a blinking cursor, like if you're in a text message and typing away, or in a note or something like that. But it's so easy to turn. I'm so glad you talked about that, Jeff. That is wonderful. I turned that on. Absolutely. Man, that's okay. That's like a whole year of tips right there. Bonus tips and everything going on, Jeff. Thank you so much for sharing. I think that's great. And I'm going to get back to my iPad Pro now.
Enjoy.
Thanks for talking, Jeff. We'll talk to you next week.
Okay. Thanks, Brett. Bye-bye, everybody.